Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining me for this little Q&A. I appreciate all the good questions that people have submitted on Facebook. Please subscribe, comment, and like below. It sucks to always have to say that, and it's annoying, but it actually really helps to grow the channel and grow the music, so I really thank you guys for that. Thanks for all the awesome questions. There's like some really good ones in here. Some are easier than others to answer, but I'm going to give my best shot at honest, insightful answers. So hope none of my answers offend you, not offend you, but shock you, or what's your favorite prog band or favorite jazz record? Who knows? I don't think anyone will be too upset, but there might be some things where you just didn't quite expect that. I'm going to try to talk quieter today. My wife says I get loud when I'm talking about subjects I'm passionate about. And when I listen back to some of the interviews, I think she's right. So, all right, let's dive right in. All these are from Facebook, so thanks guys for doing that. Timothy Purge, shout out to a fellow Tim. We don't see that much of each other in real life. You don't see a lot of Tims, at least I don't. So Timothy Purge asks, why did a Stratosphere break up? Man, diving right into it here. It's a complicated question. Let's see. So Stratosphere spent about a decade in Santa Cruz, and if anyone's ever lived there or visited, it's kind of a little cocoon. It's such a nice place to live. The weather is so good. The geography, the redwood forest meets the beach. We were just very comfortable there. One thing I would say that a Stratosphere ignored throughout pretty much their entirety of our existence is like, what's our career path here? We were not very career-minded, at least as a unit. We were so into making the art of it that I think we were a little blind of like, how is this going to eventually pay the rent? Or, now that I'm in my mid-40s, it's you have to make all those ends meet, but I almost feel like we were almost just completely avoiding it. But anyway, after Palace of Mirrors, we decided we wanted to try to step out of our little safe cocoon there in Santa Cruz and move to some other city, and we had kind of decided on, let's give Seattle a try. So we moved to Seattle. Long story short, we were kind of thrust into the darkness of the reality of making a living doing music or doing something, and we took on this big warehouse that was really expensive. I can't even remember how much it was, $3,000 a month, but we basically, a number of us had to live there. Like Jason and I lived there. I lived there with my girlfriend. He lived there with his girlfriend. The band would rehearse there. We had separate recording spaces. But there was like a paint shop next door, and the toxic fumes were like constantly filling the place. And, we were recording bands, but it was like just to make that rent was like tough. And it was, we were having a good time there. But really what was like the final thing was like my wife got pregnant, which was something we weren't expecting. And I never thought I wanted to be a dad. Ended up loving it, but like there was just no way for me to continue at that point. And I think there was all kinds of other issues going on related to like, how do we turn this into, a career and things like that. But that was sort of the decisive thing. Like, why is it ending right now? Was I'm packing my car and moving to Canada to have a baby. So after that, we thought we'd try to keep it going, but everyone just kind of went their separate ways. And honestly, everybody needed to figure those things out with how they were gonna, make a living, because we had avoided that completely almost, where in Santa Cruz we'd had little jobs or whatever to pay for stuff. I had a nice awesome caregiving job that was a great job, working for my buddy Jesse Houts, but anyway, it was a number of factors in there, but that's kind of the gist of it. Jason Jason LaFrance asks, is there any future possibility of High Castle Tele Orchestra as a live band? That's a tough one. On paper, we're a remote orchestra. That doesn't mean if there was an opportunity we wouldn't take it, but we're all older. Some of us have families and are very busy. I was always more of a studio rat than a live guy. I had a lot of fun playing live, but it was always the studio that thrilled me. So we'll see. My kids are getting a little older now, like 13 and 10. And, before I blink my eyes, they'll be in college. But I don't see that it would happen without High Castle kind of really taking off and gaining some pretty serious popularity to the point where we had some offers that we couldn't refuse. But man, then we're going to have to learn how to play this stuff live. It's like not an easy thing to do when you're just recording all the time, you know, having to get into that sort of precision live mode. But yeah. Anthony Trapani, I was on his podcast recently, Cali Death Pod, and he asked, what metal have you listened to since you came on the Cali Death Pod, and will you start a metal doo-wop project with me? Sadly, I have not listened to any metal or really much of anything since I talked to you. My life right now is very busy. Like, I'm working. I work as an ER nurse graveyard, and my kids are super busy. My daughter's got this ridiculous softball schedule, pitching lessons, batting lessons, team lessons that are an hour away, tournaments all weekend long, and we're off now. And my little 1/8-inch jack in my car doesn't work for listening to music, and any free time I get, I'm recording down in my basement here. So haven't listened to anything. Sorry, Anthony. Will I start a metal doo-wop project with you? I don't have a ton of time right now, but I will not rule it out. Why don't we do like a song as a proof of concept? My old buddy Jeff Attridge from Don Salsa said, why don't we wear leather pants? With this dad bod, I don't think that's such a good idea. I was never much of a leather pants. Did a little bit of the, like, you know, the glam metal spandex back in like 8th grade, you know, when I was into all that stuff. So I don't know. Ryan Linderman asks, I'd love to know more about how a Stratosphere came to work with Amanda Palmer. I dig the Dresden Dolls and love the Evelyn album, which has Stratosphere members all over it. Luckily, I caught up with you guys in Rothbury in 2008, but never knew much about how all that came together. From what I recall, is Amanda and Jason Webley, who did the Evelyn album together, those two, happened upon one of our shows in Boston at this venue we played a lot called the Middle East. So they came in, and I can't imagine what they thought, because it was the Palace of Mirrors tour, and the music is very different from what they're probably used to. I don't know, but they were open to it. And I think what really won them over was the unicorns and rainbows in that set, how it went from all the crazy music into that. But she approached us after the show about doing some stuff with her, and eventually, you know, we talked about it and talked about producing some tunes for her and arranging them a little bit, and then doing some live shows. So that probably would have kept going on more and more if I hadn't, you know, had to go suddenly be dad. So it was a fun thing to work on for sure, and I think it was a cool collaboration. Anyway, Sean Motley, on a similar note, asks, did Amanda Palmer kill a Stratosphere? What happened with all that? Yes, it does sort of seem like that if you just look at the timeline. So to all outward appearances, it could seem that way, but it was sort of like I explained earlier. If we moved to Seattle and it was hard to make a living, and the pregnancy, and sort of probably some other, you know, itches to turn it into more of a career. So no, she had absolutely nothing to do with the breakup of a Stratosphere, but it's an interesting theory. I like it. Zach Sakruski asks, thanks for listening. Or that's not a question. Thanks for listening to Josh Rabjohn's new single, which I heard on Facebook the other day, and I thought it sounded really nice, and I wanted to check it out more. But he asks, when it comes to writing orchestrally, what technique do you use to keep your orchestrations from getting too dense? If you listen to my music, there's obviously very few techniques going on to make it less dense. I'm not really a less is more guy. I love less is more stuff. I just don't think that's my forte. But just as when I'm adding in a lot of different instruments, if I'm writing for, you know, clarinet and flute and some saxophones, the most important thing is that they don't all play at the same time. You have them sort of interlocking and pointillistic and coming in at different spots, which kind of directs the ear toward, you know, there being something distinct there. There's a lot to go over there, and I will go over a ton of that stuff in my online conservatory when I start it early next year. But yeah, there's a ton of stuff I do, but most of my stuff, if you listen, is not very. It is dense, and I'm okay with that. But I could probably, you know, it'd be good for me to learn how to do less is more. And then Zach also asks, can I send you music? Yes, you can send me links on Facebook. I do get a lot, and it's hard for me to keep up with sometimes with my busy schedule, but I always try to get around and listen to it and then send you back some comments about it. So yeah, send it to me here on Facebook. Jay Me asks, what are the chances of an Stratosphere reunion in the future? I don't know. It's people go their separate ways, and it's not like you stay super close. I still keep up with quite a number of guys from the band, but a lot of fans are sort of clamoring for that. I haven't heard any like realistic, ways that it'll happen. I'm open to it personally, but it would be hard to get the logistics going. So I don't know. I'm open to it, but it doesn't seem super likely at this juncture. Any particularly wild, crazy stories from the early Santa Cruz days? Gosh, there's so many. Maybe one of the I've talked about this in other places, but one of the only reasons a Stratosphere, could make it in Santa Cruz, where we, was super expensive, like the rent and everything, was we took over this house that had been run by like multiple independent drug dealers, and it was like super cheap rent. So we like had a living room to rehearse in and put my studio in there, and we had that house for years. And like, I'm not sure a Stratosphere would have existed without that house. So there's one story, man. We can do a whole podcast of other stories at some point. Any younger new bands grabbing your attention these days? Confession, I'm not the greatest music listener. Most of the stuff I listen to is like 50s and 60s or soundtracks from Italy or things from different countries. So I don't do a lot of like this band, that band. I'm sure there's a lot of great ones out there. One kid that I do like is that kid. He's gotten pretty popular. Is Jacob Collier. His understanding of like music theory and harmonic series and the joy he brings to music is like insane. My buddy Stian Carstensen, who plays in High Castle, Tele Orchestra, and Farmers Market, has collaborated with Jacob, and I would love to in the future, because I've never seen a brighter, musical mind as far as like music theory and how to apply the harmonic series into music. So his stuff is pretty exciting for me, and just listen to him talk about music on YouTube. It's insane. He knows more than your music professor does, like by far. It's crazy. Anyway, Sean Motley asks, does the future hold the possibility of more Stratosphere music? I guess I went over that before. I have no idea. I'm open to it. I don't know if I would be the right one to, get all those logistics together, but I'm open to it. Who knows? Greg Cholkin asks a great question. When would you not double track vocals? I do a lot of double tracking of vocals. Yeah, great question. If you're the type of singer who's more prone to, improving the melody a little bit, or your inflection, or just your articulation of the melody, then double tracking doesn't really work at all. But if the melody is relatively fixed, it really does help it cut through. I mean, so much of the Beatles stuff is double tracked. The Beach Boys stuff is double tracked. Not just the lead, but all the background vocals are actually doubled as well, which is why it sounds so big. Recording is not a perfect medium. You need something sometimes to help it cut, and double tracking really helps that. So sort of an example, like one of my favorite singers in the world is Sam Cooke. He would sound terrible double tracked if he did it. So I mean, Sam not need to be double tracked, and it would sound awful. And he does a lot of improvising. If you listen to his songs, it would never work. But John Lennon on Strawberry Fields. Let me take you down, 'cause I'm going to. Yeah, I mean it works very well for double tracking. So, yeah, I think you can experiment on your own music on what works and what doesn't, but in general, when the melody is relatively fixed, it's not to say if you have a little, improvised inflection, you could potentially memorize that and double it, and I've done some of that as well, but I feel my voice sounds better when I double track it in general, because I'm not a real improvisatory lead singer. Tim Page, what's up, fellow Tim? asks, if you could pick a favorite scale or mode, what would you choose? I'm not a real big scale guy or mode guy. I mostly deal in chord changes, so to me it's which notes work, over that chord change, which can change from chord to chord, to add little chromatic notes here or there, or just alterations based on the chord change. And most Western music, is based on some form of chord changes, whereas in, Indian music or Persian classical music, it might be more modal or just, and I'm no expert at any of that stuff. So, I wouldn't be real qualified to say, this raga or this, scale they use in Persian classical music or Afghan music. Even though I listen to it and it's like, those are awesome modes, but I'm a little bit more of a chord change guy. So, I think that makes me more of like a Western music sort of mindset. But, obviously there's some cool modes, I've used over the years, diminished scale gets kind of boring, but it has that kind of sound. Whole tone is kind of interesting, like a dream in a Hollywood movie, but it gets boring real fast as well. I do like some of the Ethiopian modes. I can show you that real quick. The main mode they use in Ethiopian is like if I'm playing A minor, it's like a pentatonic, so it'd be like A, B, C, and then you skip D, then you go E, F, and then you skip G and go back to A. So it's 5 notes. Probably recognize it from. But there's another mode they do in Ethiopian music. It's related to that mode. So if I'm in A minor there and I take it down to F minor, this is a different mode that uses mostly the same notes, but it would be F, A flat, then these are the same notes here as the last scale, B, C, E, F. It's also pentatonic, but it has a freaking cool sound. So F minor would be the chord, but the notes would be like. I use the heck out of that on that Ethiopian tune on the Stratosphere album Quadrupus. And then here's an example of an Ethiopian song where they actually use that. Listen to this, it's so cool. Yeah, that's on a record called Ethiopian Groove, the Golden 70s. I'm pretty sure they absorbed it on some of the Ethiopeaks records as well. So awesome stuff there. Explore that mode. It's good stuff. Okay, Jason Sherman asks, why did John Hooley attack you on stage in the Passion for Life DVD? Seemed to be a lot going on behind the scenes there. I was having a hard time recalling that one, specifically on the Passion for Life DVD. I haven't seen that in ages. It did make me think back to an incident that happened at a San Diego show, I believe on the first Secret Chiefs tour. And it's not one I'm super proud of, but I definitely let it get away from me a little bit. I was doing a bass solo in Hunger Strike, and I'll be honest, I'm not a huge fan of audience clapping along. But in this case, it was like horrendously off time. So, I would never do that in an audience, be just clapping along, especially if it was, off time. And I don't really like clapping to begin with. So it was extremely hard to do this bass solo. And I got frustrated. And I think what I did was start slapping myself. But it definitely had sort of a mocking the audience tone. And John was not too happy with me about it. He didn't attack me on stage, but it was definitely a point of contention. And in retrospect, I think I was probably wrong there, but it was just kind of a spur of the moment thing in my young 20s. But on this DVD, what Mark Thornton is telling me, the guy who made the DVD, is that it was probably staged. Maybe we sort of based it on that other fight. I don't know, but I think it was a intro to Mike the Healer coming out and leading a meditation session. So I think that was scripted. If that's the case, I need to watch that DVD again. I don't even have it. Someone want to send it to me? Larry Joe Smith, who's the video guy for High Castle Tele Orchestra. I think he lives in North Carolina. What's up, Larry? He's given me a 3-part question. What was it like to meet Chris Bogan face-to-face for the first time? What was the most fulfilling aspect of that meeting? And did you guys hug? Ooh. All right, for those who don't know, Chris Bogan is my partner in High Castle Tele Orchestra. He's the guitarist and co-producer, and we run all the day-to-day stuff, and we're constantly talking to each other. Let's change this or that guitar tone. It's like a nonstop. We both have families, so we can kind of relate on our like working stiff schedules and things like that. But anyway, we didn't meet for, gosh, it was at least a year and a half that we were actually like legit collaborating and going through all this stuff. After a while, it got pretty weird because of he was supposed to come out and COVID happened and just nothing ended up working out. But I can't remember exactly how much time, a year and a half or almost 2 years before we finally met face to face this last summer. So it wasn't really awkward or anything other than just the like, gosh, it's like almost like online dating someone for so long. But, you know, it's music and not dating. So picked him up. It wasn't awkward, though. We had a really good time. It was very we're familiar to each other, so we get along well. And we had mixes to basically dive right into it. I think we had like 3 days, so we're just like eat, mix, coffee or whatever. So the most fulfilling aspect was finally getting to sit there in the room with him and actually enjoy, you know, bouncing ideas off of each other like in person for the mixes. We were mixing a tune called At Last He Will that's going to be on the upcoming High Castle record, as well as one called Mutual Hazard. And we got, I think, most of the mixes done. You know, I had them kind of queued up with the right, you know, EQ and plug-in settings and all the buses set up so that we could kind of dive right in and not have to do a lot of that grunt work. Did you guys hug? I think we did. You know, with COVID, my hug reflex has become weird. It's like, I'm not afraid to hug people, but people are always doing the fist bump or the elbow bump. And I just, it's kind of like a Larry David thing. I have no idea what people want. If people want to hug me, they can hug me. So I think we did hug. It was probably not like a, you know, it's more like a bro hug. So it's probably brief, not super long or like a Big Red commercial or anything like that. Lorenzo Rossi, tell us why you are called a Stratosphere. I know Eric Estrada was involved, but before I got in the band, it was like this little jazz band, like that was put together by like Hooley and some other people to like play gigs at coffee shops and make $25 here and there. So I can't remember. Maybe someone knows more. Dave Murray might know. John might know. My memory is pretty hazy regarding like why was it called a Stratosphere other than Eric Estrada. It doesn't make a lot of sense philosophically, and it just kind of stuck. But hey, not changing that name. Too late. Anthony Fortsell asks, hey, so how is this for a question? How was the experience of licensing your music for games? I know it only happened a few times. There was the Flash game Gish. But what were the thoughts going through your head? Did you have to deliberate whether it was appropriate for your music, which songs you wanted licensed, and so on? So for instance, with the Silent Elk of Yesteryear, that's what he wrote, in Gish, there was an instrumental version without lyrics. Did you have any rules you gave them, or was it a free-for-all? It's a hard question. Like I mentioned earlier, we were never great like business people. Like people would contact us and be like, hey, can we use this for like some little tiny movie? Like we're like, sure, whatever. Like if there was something bigger, we would have probably looked into it more. But those guys who made Gish were from Santa Cruz, and I remember working with them, and I think I made some music specifically for that game as well, and then we filled it out with some Stratosphere stuff. So I can't remember what the financial arrangement was. They weren't a huge company. We didn't make much off of it, but they definitely paid us to use the music. And you know, we're so small that we're always just like, it's cool, let people hear it or whatever. Like it was I did some music for other games as well, but that one kind of developed sort of a cult following. But we never really gave a ton of thought. You know, we'd come up at band practice and be like, hey, they want to use the music for this game. Like maybe we should have asked for more money, who knows? But we were always just like I said, we were not very business oriented, like to a fault. Like Timbo was super good with like, he kept the books and the finances and the taxes, but as far as like, we needed someone that was like the forward thinking, like what's the next step for this group and how do we grow type of thing, which we just didn't have. But anyway, I don't have any regrets about using it for Gish. We didn't think too much is it appropriate for the game or anything like that. Maybe we would have if it was like a lamer game or something, but not too many of us are really gamers anyway. I'm not sure anyone is, except maybe some of the newer guys that came in on the Palace era, like Lee. Lee was into games, but yeah. Jimmy Angelakos, I hope I said that right, asks, for Stratosphere, what influences drew you towards the Balkan, Romani, traditional European tunes, and how did you learn the styles? They're usually passed down generation to generation. Yes, they are. I think it was when I met Trey backstage at Slim's. I had somehow almost snuck in to a backstage, I think it was a Cobra show, like before I knew any of them. And anyway, I'll get more into that story later. Oh, it's next, actually, the next question. But anyway, he had written down a couple different things that he'd recommended to me, and I was still in high school at the time, so it was like Raymond Scott. I think he wrote down Carl Stalling, some noise stuff like Merzbow, but he wrote down Tarafte Hayduk's Magic Horses and Evil Eye. Honorable Brigands, Magic Horses and Evil Eye was the record he wanted me to hear, and also the movie Lachodram, which they appear in. And I took that back, to the Don Salsa warehouse where we were practicing, and we were instantly hooked. I mean, the music is so authentic. It's virtuosic, but it's also, there's something just old about it. It just sounds like you're hearing the history of the world when you hear that music, but it is just so infectious. So how did we learn to play the styles? We kind of didn't. Like, we're from California. We would do our best. I'm a big believer that in like authentic music is authentic music, and I would never claim what a Stratosphere was doing was authentic in that realm. We made it a little bit more authentic, like when we did that song Smuggled Mutation, but that was because we brought in like the violin player Fabrice, who had been playing with Fish Tank, who had studied Romanian music. We also brought in a cymbalum player who recorded remotely, but those guys are just legit. I mean, you either know the music or you don't. So, and then we added our sort of metal thing on top of it. But as far as Timba did his best to sort of learn some of the ornaments, but as far as like Timba would probably be the first one to tell you like this is not authentic, ornaments that he's doing. You, like you said, generation to generation. I'm not sure there's really a way to fake that stuff. So we turned it into more of a mishmash and turned it into our own thing. But I would not claim that we're playing authentic Balkan or Romanian music in any sense of the phrase. Sean Motley asks, how did you guys meet Trey? Well, a lot of I had we had a band in high school, Don Salsa. Had myself, my brother Doug, Jason Schimmel, Stratosphere's guitarist, and Jeff Attridge, and this singer guy Rob Hondrick. Anyway, we were pretty obsessed with Bungle. Like, it had kind of changed our lives, and we were just going to that. So we were just like, how do we? I think we went to see Disco Volante on tour, and eventually I think we drove up to San Francisco, and they were doing like those Cobra shows at Slim's, and I would sit in the parking lot, and we had like the Don Salsa like tape, like it wasn't even a finished record. We're like, this segment and this segment, they'll like that. So I think we caught them like after sound check going to rehearsal, and I don't know if I handed it, was it to Zorn or Patton, but they ended up, Mike had like a little noise rig, and a cassette player was part of that, or like a little Walkman or something. He ended up opening the show by playing this part of the Don Salsa, which was like, we were just blown away. Then I think we were kind of like loitering in the like alley backstage area, and William Wynant, the percussionist, I think just gave, I don't know if it was just me or two of us, a backstage pass. So we like, walked back to the Slim's backstage area, and I think mostly who we were talking to was Trey. So that was the first time. I can't remember the second time, but I was sort of stalking him in a way, not like, not outside the window or anything like that, but I think there was other shows, and I think I told him, oh, you got to check out this Kurzweil keyboard. It's actually this one right here that he sequenced. None of them knew they were robots on. That one, I programmed the California keyboard setup on that keyboard. So I basically was like, hey, you need to check out this keyboard. And eventually I got his number and he took me up on it and ended up borrowing it for a couple weeks and sequenced his tunes that were on California and some Secret Chief stuff. And Bungle ended up buying one of those keyboards. So it was kind of like no looking back after that. I think a Stratosphere was coming, was finishing our recordings at that time, and then he decided, hey, we'll put that in Mimicry, and the rest is history. Pavel, oh God, I hope I don't get this wrong. Pavel Konstantinov asks, what was the Lotusphere lineup and the story in short? Do you have any unreleased recordings of Lotusphere performances? I really, really enjoy the 3 live recordings that I found on the Internet Archive, but the info on the project is scarce. It'd be cool to hear the history. Lotusphere was a band, I think, from Santa Clarita, and some of the people, we had a huge contingency of fans there. Adam Stacy, who played keyboards and accordion in the Stratosphere in the Palace era, I think was in that group, and a number of their friends that were Stratosphere fans. I wasn't in that group, so I couldn't really tell you. Maybe Adam could actually answer that for you. I can give you his contact, Adam. I know they opened for us at the Knitting Factory, and their band was pretty cool if I remember, but I can't remember a ton about it. Ryan Linderman asks, I'm curious about the backstory to how a Stratosphere came to playing with Jacob Fred Jazz Odyssey. I don't know how the shows got booked. Maybe it was through Hooley. He used to do some booking and talking to different bands, and so I didn't know them at all when we first started playing with them, and we played, I can't remember how many shows, but they were super cool guys. I still chat with their bass player, Reed, from time to time, super knowledgeable. They were one of those like more open-minded, jam bands, but they had a jazz background and could take things pretty out. So I know we jammed too. It was a fun experience. I don't remember a ton about it as far as any other details of like how it came to be. But fun playing with those guys, and yeah, still talk to Reed. He's an awesome dude, awesome bass player and musician. Jim Romeo, old school Stratosphere fan. We used to always hang out with Jim at I think it was Buffalo, New York. Is that right, Jim? He's one of those fans that every time I release something, he's going to send like a little concise email with like, here's my thoughts on it, and here's my impressions, and then have some comments. You should try a cover of this sometime. Or if like, does anyone have that vinyl, that Greek song that I'm looking for? And he'll photocopy, scan it in, and he's awesome. Anyway, Jim asks, when we hung out on the Palace of Mirrors tour, you felt it was a Stratosphere's best album. Oh, that's what I had told him. All these years later, do you still feel that way? Also, are there any Stratosphere songs you don't like or regret releasing? Wish was never released when you're looking back? Yes, I do still think Palace of Mirrors is our best album. To me, that's always the sort of direction I wanted the band to go. And in the early days, I think there was a lot of different ideas about that. John and I Jason and I had sort of brought this sort of crazy, like Mr. Bungle type of vibe to the band, where Dave added this more like metal, and John came from this background of like jazz and pop music and jamming and things like that, and he added an awesome element to it. But I don't think John gets enough credit actually for being like such a trooper for going along with like how crazy the band was, because that was not really like his wheelhouse. So there's some people that might be like, oh, John's music was not crazy and whatever, but like I give him a ton of credit for hanging around, and he added so much to the band. But like when he left, it kind of allowed us to like, oh, let's go in this sort of sci-fi philosophical sort of direction that we had never really quite been able to pull off before. So yeah, Palace is by far my favorite record. I know not all fans feel that same way, and a lot of the like fun from the early days was not really there, but that wasn't really what that record was about. There's songs I don't like or regret releasing. Probably. I mean, the Quadrupus album was not real cohesive. I put that song in there, At Least We Have Today, which clearly sounds like an I.S.S., like my Beach Boys obsession. Not sure how that relates to, Stratosphere. There may have been even a couple more on that record that were like, who knows, I don't sit there and like cringe or anything, and I don't try to look back. I was pretty immature in my 20s, compared to now. So There's definitely things I would not do now, but I don't necessarily look back and go like, oh, if we could only take that off the record. I think in Quadrupus, we just, David left and we just didn't have much of a collective vision for the record. So there's some awesome tracks on there, but it's not my favorite as far as like the way it flows or the way it turned out as a whole. But Ryan Linderman, I'd love to know more about your Smile mixes in the past. I received a CDR with some purchases in the past. Yeah, I used to give those away. He received a CDR with some CDs he bought from us, and I had some writing, a pamphlet that went with it, and it was my 6th version. He says, I'm curious what led to the revisions and what inspired you to take it on in the first place. Such a wormhole here. I can't get into all of it now, but I will in the future, I promise. Some of you may know Smile, the Lost Beach Boys album from '67, but is regarded by people, including people like in the Bungle scene and things like that, as one of the greatest recordings of all time. It's extremely psychedelic. It's almost like a pop symphony. But anyway, Brian never finished it, and he was recording it like modularly. So he was recording like little pieces, and no one knew exactly how they were going to fit together. So they've since released all the like fragments and box sets, so you can go in and like make your own mixes now. And if you look online, like you'll see a ton of people that make their own, and there are so many different ways that this thing could have fit together. It's nuts. So I haven't made a version in like a long time, and I still haven't, even though they've released a box set, but I definitely plan on doing that. So I will circle back to that and come up with more of it, but I highly encourage you to look into the original Beach Boys 1967 Smile sessions, probably my favorite recordings of all time. Brooke M. Olson. What's up, Brooke? I remember you from Santa Cruz. Will you in your busy life be willing to give me a bass lesson like once a month if I drive to Santa Cruz? Well, I don't live in Santa Cruz anymore. I'm in Denver now, so it would probably have to be online. I would be open to that kind of thing, so just message me. Why not? Jamie Furtado asks, if you were to put together a compilation album featuring the tracks you're most proud of from each project, what songs would make the cut? That's a tough one. I'm just gonna have to pick a Stratosphere. Maybe I would choose Colossal Risk, because I like that sort of like sci-fi espionage sound, and I think the production on that tune is really good. I.S.S. I'd probably choose the title track She's a Girl, because it's just so elaborate. The background vocals are so complicated, and the recreating a 60s style backing track inside of a digital environment is very hard, and I feel it turned out really well in that regard. High Castle Tele Orchestra, there's a song that's going to be on the forthcoming record that's like the longest song on the record, and it's probably one of the most elaborate things I've ever written, called Diagnosing Johnny, so look for that. Don Salsa would be the first track on our only album called The Deck, which is like 30 minutes. Having some high school kids record something that insane is still something I look back upon and can be proud about. So yeah. Jared Moore asks, I've heard you cite the Beach Boys as a big influence, and as an artist you've analyzed a lot musically. Curious what your favorite Beach Boys records are and what most charms you about their musical canon. The Beach Boys have this reputation in America, for just their old surf and car songs, and a lot of people don't know otherwise. I didn't either. I remember when Bungle came out with California, and I was hanging out with Trey, and he's like, I think I'd heard that, Brian Wilson was a genius and all this stuff before that, but I'd never gotten into it. And I was at Trey's place in San Francisco, and he goes, here, we'll check this out. And he put on I Just Wasn't Made for These Times from Pet Sounds. And a lot of people have a really hard time shaking that sort of reputation that they have. Even those songs, if you analyze like the harmonies and stuff, there's still like complicated stuff going on. The songs are some of them are just kind of dorky. Especially the Mike Love songs, got her daddy's car. But all the like Brian Wilson, harmonies and stuff are just amazing. It's actually pretty weird if you think about it, to superimpose like barbershop Four Freshmen type of harmonies on top of like Chuck Berry style rock and roll is a weird like novel style of music. But they sort of evolved very quickly, and their album Pet Sounds is looked at as one of the greatest records ever. You would have 40 or 50 musicians in a room, those Wrecking Crew guys that played on all those records, and be like, oh, we need a bass harmonica here and a timpani here and a string section here, and we're going to need a bongo player, and we're going to need 3 basses. The little ensembles that were customized and they put together were just nuts. Like, Listen to Pet Sounds without the vocals. You can hear it on YouTube. You can buy the box set or whatever. That tells a lot of just thinking that this was all just one take from a group that's in front of them. It wasn't overdubs or anything like that. Anyway, my favorite record is Smile, the one in '67 that did not come out. That to me is like the pinnacle of recording, and I'm honestly not a huge fan of anything that happened after that, because I kind of feel like that was Brian's Icarus moment, you know, flying too high to the sun and his wings came off, and he still did some good stuff after that. To me, it's like a whole alternate history that if Smile had come out, it may have affected popular music differently. So I have a hard time going past Smile. I love all kinds of tracks leading up to Pet Sounds and Smile, but there is obviously going to be some dorky surf and car songs in there, but the ballads are always, and I mean, listen to the song The Warmth of the Sun, you know, that he wrote, I think, the day JFK died, one of the most haunting ballads of all time. The chord progression is one of the weirdest chord progressions ever, and he just makes it sound like this pretty thing. But I love how innocent their music. I love how complex it is without broadcasting to the listener that it's complex, because a lot of people that like a Stratosphere like, you know, progressive music and complicated and fast, but there's different kinds of complicated, and the chord progression is where you can be sort of secretly complicated, and that's what the Beach Boys are. Is there's very few bands that have more complicated chord progressions than they do. Probably the three that come to mind as the most, you know, elaborate chord progressions, you know, in pop rock music would be the Beach Boys, Stevie Wonder, and probably Steely Dan. You know, just have like the ridiculous chord changes that you would need to be like a jazz aficionado to sort of understand more. But anyways, the music, I just love it. I could go on and on forever, but Pet Sounds and Smile are my favorite records. The 67 version of Smile, unreleased, like not the 2004 Brian Wilson re-release, which I thought was awesome, but the recording tones and all that weren't the same. Let's see here. Carlos Enrique Pineda, or is it Pineda? Who's your favorite 70s prog rock band? Oh God, another answer. It's trying to get me in trouble here. As progressive as a Stratosphere is, like, none of us were ever that into prog. Like, never got too into Zappa or King Crimson. Like, Bungle was the first band we got into that was like that. And what we started doing was like exploring their influences, especially from Disco Volante. And we're like, oh, what's this, you know, Morricone thing, or this Peter Thomas thing, or Joe Meek, or all this stuff they were kind of looking at. And as far as I know, they don't seem super into prog either. People are saying a Zappa and things, and they, according to Trey, and when talking, they never listened to much Zappa, neither did we. So I don't know what prog even means, other than, you know, if there's like complicated, you know, passages or time signatures or fast notes. And I know a Stratosphere definitely falls into that category, so it seems like it would make a lot of sense that a lot of that stuff influenced us. But, you know, another, you know, sort of like a Beach Boys band, like you like the Beach Boys, like I like a lot of bands that people would probably be like, why do you like them? And it might be for reasons that aren't immediately apparent. Like, I don't think Steely Dan is considered a prog band by any sense of the word, but their chord progressions are like so far beyond other pop rock groups that I think people that write them off, and I was one, I hated them for the longest time. It was my dad's favorite band, but finally realized one day, like, oh my God, these chords, like I claim to be this chord progression guy. I didn't even realize like they were doing it. But so I don't think that's prog, but to me it's prog because their chord progressions are so prog. But I don't know. I couldn't tell you about favorite 70s prog band otherwise. Johnny Rojas asks, we once talked at the Hollywood Knitting Factory during the Palace of Mirrors tour, and you mentioned how each note had a particular rhythmic pattern. Any chance you can elaborate on your Q&A? Not 100% sure what you're referring to here, but I think I'd be talking about like harmonic series stuff. Like when you play a note, it is going at a certain hertz, right? So a certain number of times per second. Therefore, you can calculate, you know, if this, you know, if I calculate this frequency of this C, you know, let's say it's 256, it's going 256 times per second. You can calculate like how many beats per minute that is by multiplying by 60, since there's 60 seconds in a minute, and tempos are in beats per minute. So you actually therefore have like, you play this note and your tempo is actually in sync with the note. Even if you don't hear that on a conscious level, there are ways to sync up harmonies and rhythms with actual notes. But I'm going to be going way into that in my conservatory, which would be way too much to get into here. I hope that's what you're asking, because I can't think of what else it would be. David Ariel Herrera, Asks, what's up with the concept behind Buck Fever? How did you name any of Stratosphere's instrumentals? For example, Hunger Strike. Oh God, this is going to be some ridiculous answers here. Buck Fever, we were in a way a bunch of sheltered California kids that really only knew our sort of left coast California. So when we went on our first tour, I think we were driving into Denver from above. So we got into, was that Highway 80 above it, instead of going over the Rockies. And I think we stopped at some truck stop in Wyoming. And gosh, it was just so different compared to what we were used to. People in hunting gear, and someone saw this Buck Fever hat or something. We knew right then, we're like, this is going to be the record. And, I think in a lot of ways we were, sort of poking fun at that lifestyle. But thinking back now from a more middle-aged perspective, I think it's just something we didn't understand as well as, being these young 20-year-olds from California. It's just such a different culture. So definitely, poking fun of that culture, but I don't know. It's not necessarily something I look down on now. If people are hunting for food or whatever like that, but sport hunting, I'm not a huge fan of it. I've never hunted in my life, but, it's not something I automatically turn my nose up at this point. Anyway, how do we name so dumb, some of our song names? Like, listen to the song. Go right now and listen to the song Can't Get Enough by Winger. Dave and I used to watch this video. It is the most insane video ever. The guy's doing ballet moves. He's got these perfect teeth that he keeps smiling. He's like the anti-rock star because it's just too clean, doing these triple ballet spins, and the lyrics are saying, it's all right, feels good, when I'm in your chains, it's understood. Like, there's the name of the record right now. He's like, can't get enough, I'm still hungry. So, a lot of our banter was very locker room back in the day of like, you have a girlfriend or whatever, and people would go on these long, dry spells. And I don't know who coined it, Dave, or maybe we called it a hunger strike, like when we just things weren't going well for us on that front. So it's just stupid. Other names, for some reason, people know we used to watch Days of Our Lives. It was just something to do to like pass the time, at noon on Santa Cruz Day. And they would have this movie theater in Days of Our Lives, and they would have these fake movies in there, and they had such awesome titles. So we got a lot of ours from there. The Dapper Bandits, Meteorite Showers. I'm trying to figure out what else was from there. I know there was another couple and songs that never, Vampire Invasion, we never finished that song, but there was a number. There was not really a lot going on. Some of it is very immature, but it just is what it is, kind of locker room, young, dumb stuff. So anyway, Luis Morales asks, can you talk a bit about the process of composing, recording some of Stratosphere's 8-bit tunes? Like I said before, not a lot of us were real gamers, except we all grew up with like NES. So we just loved like the, Mario and Zelda and Metroid and Contra, just like the basic classic NES games. I never had like one of those chiptune synthesizers, and now I still don't, even though there's like great plugins that can get that exact tune. Like I would sample little keyboards and find the little white noise snare and sample it into my Kurzweil here. So my sounds are not the best video game sounds ever, but they kind of got the point across. When you're sequencing with some of those sounds, though, they just kind of inspire you to write a certain kind of music. Whereas if I was writing it like just on a piano, like I would never write it like that. So yeah. But anyway, it's not something I really do much anymore. I'm not that into video games, but I think I do go for some of those 8-bit type of sounds sometimes, like when I'm just getting a tone or something like in High Castle, but it's more of just this little element, not something that's primary. Mike Gilbert asks, when I first heard and realized the elevator music interlude, for lack of a better description, at 102 in Rise and Shine was also in Don Salsa's The Deck at 755. Yes, check that out, guys. It is the same thing. It was in Don Salsa first. Stratosphere stole it. I think Jason wrote the part, though, so he stole from himself. It made me so freaking happy, he said. I thought it was absolutely brilliant how you guys rehashed that theme. Was that interlude an original section melody you guys wrote? Also, were there ever other themes, sections, or melodies that were resurrected or reused in a similar way? Lastly, whose idea was it to put Duke's Caravan into the Dapper Bandits? That was a terrific transition back to the second theme. I'm not sure there is any other recycled themes. Back in Don Salsa, Jason had wrote it as a game show type of thing, and it was just a cool little part. So yeah, I don't know. Somehow it just came back in Rise and Shine, and it was a good little thing. And I think someone comments later about the crackling, intermittent speaker there. We'll go over that in a sec. Caravan, that's a jazz standard. Duke Ellington. I don't know who has idea. Jason wrote the majority of the Dapper Bandits, but I'm not sure if it was like Hooley, who, the chord right at that section I think is a C7 flat 9, which a Caravan is just a vamp on a flat 9 chord that eventually resolves to the minor to 1, so like C7 flat 9 to F minor. I'm not sure what song Caravan's in, but anyway, who knows? Hooley might have just improvised it. Maybe it was Jason's idea to do, but it seemed like something that probably got added in the rehearsal room and just stuck. Joey Truthhurt asks, were any of you guys actually into deer hunting, or is everything about buck fever pure fantasy? Yeah, none of us were into deer hunting. It was a joke. And like I said, as much as we're poking fun of it there, like I don't necessarily have the same perspective on that now, because I think a lot of people do a lot of different things, and I may not understand it, but that's not a reason for me to just like write it off or make fun of it. But yeah, not a big fan of sport hunting, though, I will say that. But hey, people do all kinds of weird, bad stuff. Also, what kind of chips are being eaten when the Green Hill gets paused? I'm pretty sure those were like a cheese curl type of thing, but they're probably the organic version, because we had this little organic food store like right down the block from our house we would walk to all the time, called the Food Bin, or the FB as we called it back in the day. Also, he asks, Johnny Truthert still, there's a spot on my Buck Fever CD where one of the channels drops out for a few seconds. I've always wondered, is this something you guys did on the master just to raise eyebrows, or is my disc defective? It seems like something a bunch of weirdos like a Stratosphere might do, but who knows? I love that effect, because that's what we were going for. John Hooley had all this old PA equipment, like that his dad used to run some venue in San Francisco, like way back in the day. So we had like these old speakers, and I'm a big fan of like repurposing, sounds where you run them out. Here's the clean sound we have, but let's run it out through this little speaker. So we were finding ways to make it go intermittent, and that was just the sound I was looking for. And the effect it had on you of like scratching your head, I was like, did they intend that? Like, that's awesome. That's what I was going for. So I haven't done that in a while. I should do that again sometime soon. Matt Hammers asks, so what is the story behind El Stronzolo? That's a song on the Don Salsa record. It became something of an inside joke among my friends and I last year. So that's, the one song, The Deck, is 30 minutes long. El Stronzolo is like the one real digestible song on that record. In our like juvenile sort of mindset, like we were writing like vaguely Italian music. I think El Stronzolo means like the piece of crap. We had like a dictionary of like foreign obscenities, like totally stupid. But and then there's this little plot in the story where like China and Russia invade Italy, and it goes into this part that we referred to as Chinese death metal. And then so it comes back to the Italian themes, but it sounds Chinese now, because I guess the Chinese and Russians had won. And at the end, he's saying, the guy sounds like he's dying, the main character, Alfredo Luigi Bonello. And he says, now you must eat your pasta without a fork, because they're going to eat it with chopsticks, would be the implication. It's a cool tune. People always ask me about that one. Very listenable, especially for Don Salsa. So everybody check that out. I'll probably upload that to my YouTube channel soon. Yeah. Another question from Douglas Porter that I deferred to here. He says, what are your favorite 3 jazz albums? Oof. Well, I'll be honest. I'm not... I play some jazz, like stand-up bass, and I'm not much of a pure jazz guy. Like, I absolutely love jazz for the skill level it gives you and what it does to people's musicianships, because there are probably no better musicians than jazz. Their rhythm, their sense of swing, or like adding a little bit of swing into something that's straight. Like if you listen to all the like 60s, Wrecking Crew stuff, all the musicians that played on all the hits of those days, they would add this feel to it that could only come from a jazz musician, but the music was not jazz. So, I can listen to like old jazz records, whether it's like Charlie Parker or Cannonball Adderley or like whoever, and especially if I'm like making dinner or something, but like maybe that's a fault of my own. I just don't necessarily love jazz as like a primary thing. Like if I go to a show, like I get bored to death. Like there could be the best soloist ever, but the form of the songs bore me. Like playing the melody and then soloing for like 10 or 15 minutes and then playing the melody again, like is just not exciting to me. I like it when it's more arranged, or what even is jazz? Like, is Raymond Scott jazz? I love Raymond Scott. They call it cartoon jazz, or the Four Freshmen, you know, that influenced the Beach Boys. It's almost more of, it's not barbershop, but it's it has some of that influence, but it's jazz too. So like there's a lot you could call jazz. I mean, some of these Italian soundtracks, I mean, they're jazz, but they're like composed and arranged. Like listen to this one, Seven Golden Men from Armando Travioli. Is this jazz? Speed it up to a little bit later. I mean, it's totally jazz, but it's not like real jazz. I don't know. Like, to me, that is way more exciting than listening to someone solo all night. Like, sorry if people don't like that answer or whatever, but I absolutely love. I think jazz is like it's like working out and eating your vitamins and eating well of musicianship. But to me, it's not like it's not the end goal. It's like something you use to then, you know, furnish your end goal. So I don't know if that makes sense, but. Okay, last three questions are all of a similar nature. Andrew Todd, who's actually our engineer for the Palace of Mirrors tour, one of the reasons why that DVD sounded so good, because we never had an engineer. You know, Bubba, when we got to the club, never understood a band like a Stratosphere, and it was really a hard band to mix. Plus, we had all these like samples and extra instruments. It would have been a disaster, but he is the reason why that DVD sounds good, is because he knew how to mix our stuff. And when it turned metal, to turn on the triggered kick and the metal guitars up, and when it comes down for jazz and all that stuff, because it sounds really awesome when a metal kick is still remaining when it goes from metal into jazz. Not so much, but Andrew did an awesome job. And he asks, what would you consider essential outboard gear, plugins, etc. for a home studio? Mike James asks, I'd like to know about what effects, pedals, VSTs, software you're into. Joe Ferrara asks, what are your favorite reverb plugins? Andrew, as far as outboard gear, I love outboard gear. I don't have a ton of budget for it, so most of the stuff I do is in the computer, although like going into the computers obviously are really important to have like a decent, you know, chain. I use a Warm 73, which is a Neve preamp emulator, and I also use a Warm Audio WA76, which is their 1176 emulator. Those are two of the most like classic pieces of gear for going in, you know, for recording, and they sound pretty similar to those. I'm sure the original units have some more detail or something, but it's hard to tell the difference. And that's the main thing I use. I use a mic now. I don't even know what it's called, a gauge. It's just kind of like a cheap, cheap U87 clone. So anyway, I don't use a ton of outboard gear stuff because I can do so much manipulation. If I had the money, I totally would do more. And, you know, if we do drums, we go to a good studio usually, and I mix to 1/2-inch tape when we're done. So I'll use all that stuff when I need to, but most of what I can do is inside the box, and even to make it sound really dirty and analog. So anyway, I'm going to go over some of those plugins and actually show them here. I don't use a ton of pedals. Mike James, my guitarist Chris Bogan probably does. I do most of my stuff in the computer. And then Joe asked my favorite reverb plugin. So I'm going to take a little drum beat in 4764 from the High Castle Tele Orchestra song Claw Peels. Sounds like 6/8, but it's got a missing 64th note. And I'm going to just show you some of my favorite plugins. One thing I love to do is dirty stuff up. So like I'm always looking for like analog ways to dirty it up. So obviously you need compression. There's something called Varicomp I use, which is by Native Instruments, I think. And it's like a Manly emulation, but it's a plugin it's a compressor you can just hit really hard and get some nice smack to it. So here it is. So that's without it. Now with it. It's really good on the master bus, bass, vocals, anything. You can just smack the heck out of that thing. I love getting analog distortion. So like a mic preamp, when you push it too hard, will break up and it has this pleasant tone. So Saturation Knob by Softtube. Listen to how this breaks it up in an analog type of way. So none, and then you just add it in. Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, there was so many years you could not get a sound like that with plugins, but Softtube's a great company. It's a little expensive, but they make good stuff. Softtube also makes a tape machine emulator. You can get real subtle with this one. Like it just, tape is a subtle thing where it kind of glues things together and tames some of the highs and adds a little bit of tape compression and a little bit of subtle distortion. But so you can get a real like modest setting with this. But you could also push it if you just drive the input. Love that plugin. Also has a really nice high end here, which is one of the nicest high end EQs. If you ever need just a little, like sometimes it's so hard to get a really nice sounding high treble EQ. So this is just high frequency, and I'm not sure what curve they're doing, but it is. I use it on the entire mix sometimes. If you're just looking for a perfect way to get more brightness into the mix or take some away, listen to what this does. I mean, if you're into EQs, there's never been a better sounding treble EQ in the computer than this thing. So let's take it out. And then let's just start adding it back in. It adds all that air without it sounding too tinty. Then I use a lot of there's like degrading plugins. This one called RC20 Retro Color. It's got all these like 8-bit and I'm not sure, it's some kind of modeling or something. If I wanted cassette tape or like a VHS tape, I love this one. Listen what happens if I run this through a VHS tape. That's with it and without. I mean, listen to that. You could even do mix, but it can phase if you do this, but you can do some of it. Noise, I can control how much noise or no noise or the pitch wobble. Distortion. Can do like an old degraded cassette tape. That can be really useful if you're taking like some digital keyboard sound or something and you're just wanting to dirty it up. Like you don't need to do it to the whole mix. You pick certain elements and you just say, this organ I'm going to run through the VHS tape. There's one other one made by Waves Factory that's like a cassette deck emulator. And I actually use a real cassette deck. A lot I'll smash stuff out to there and then bring it back in and realign it. But this thing sounds pretty good too. Listen to this. So you drive it harder with the input, it'll break it up more. Without it, with it. Jeez. Then you can do different tape types. It's amazing. And like I said, it's not something you necessarily want on the whole mix. I mean, maybe it is, but like just running certain elements into that thing, it sounds incredible. Now, Joe Ferrara was asking about reverb plugins. My favorite go-to is the expensive Altiverb, which they use for like Hollywood studios, and it's a convolution reverb, which means it like samples the actual reverb, and somehow there's some, little DSP engine that can turn your sound into that one. So what's cool about this is it can be like a space that they sample. It can be a piece of gear. It can be like a recording studio where you just want a little bit of ambience. So check this thing out. It's pretty incredible. So pretty cool. But let's say you wanted to go into like a piece of gear or something like that. Sorry, I'm like really slow right now. Why is that not working? Oh, there we go. Let's go into like a piece of like spring reverb or something like. And you wouldn't do this on drums or anything. It's just kind of showing you the tone. There's so many different sounds you can get with this thing. It's crazy. If you wanted to go into like, look at these like Echo mic children's toys. Or a drum. Or like a 30-foot tank. So Altiverb is awesome. You can do, they use it for, like Hollywood movies, if they just want it to sound like it's in a little living room or in a closet, like whatever. It sounds good for anything. But another one I like to use is spring. I love spring reverb, and sometimes the impulse responses, like an Altiverb, it doesn't quite model it correctly. So this one by Audio Thing Springs has all these different units, and it sounds killer. I usually wouldn't put drums through spring reverb, but it just shows you the tone. That's the unit they used on California, Mr. Bungle, that Furman RV1. This thing just sounds old school, man. It sounds good. Yeah, you can get dirty with that thing. It's crazy. And the last one, it's more of a subtle one. It's Abbey Road by Waves. It's like the plate emulator. Obviously, you need a good recording plate for anything. Yeah. There's a ton more plugins. I'm going to be going a ton into that stuff, like when I start my online school conservatory thing early next year. Anyway, thank you guys so much. If you made it this far, congratulations. That's nuts. This took a lot longer to record the video than I thought it was going to, but thank you for participating, for the questions, for listening. And if you haven't subscribed, please subscribe. Leave me some comments on this video, some likes, and spread the word and help me get this music bigger, because we're a small operation at this point, looking to grow a little bit. So thank you so much, and have a wonderful Sunday.